All right, and welcome back to another episode of Gone in 60 Seconds. Phil.Coria, account executive here at Workday. It's great to virtually see you again. And before we start, just wanted to say thank you, especially to everybody that's seen every one of these episodes. They've been extremely enjoyable to put together, in a fun, creative way of just sharing content and having you guys learn a little bit more about Workday. So I know you guys are extremely busy and your lives are really busy with everything going on right now. So I just wanted to say thank you. With that, let's jump on in. So, just as a quick recap of all the episodes, if you hadn't had a chance to take a look at them, I'll give you a quick recap of everything because this is the final episode of what we'll be talking about before we kind of jump into the next phase. But we talked about deployment. We also talked about just life in production and the ownership model. We did get into the capabilities of Workday, the one platform with global and mobile at the core, giving you the ability to plan, execute, and analyze end to end with the subset of tools that we talked about that augment Workday. And then we also went into the platform experience. You guys had a chance to take a look at Workday live and a live tenant and have me go in and just clicking around, and you guys were able to see kind of what we meant by real-time data and the full business process framework and so forth. So hopefully you guys enjoyed last week's episode because that was a fun one to put together. So with that, let's jump into kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get started, I just want to kind of set the tone in terms of how companies spend money. And this was a study done on public companies from 2007 to 2018. Thought this was relevant to share because 55% of that were corporate buybacks or stock buybacks, which really in the private market is really capital injection. Same thing with dividends, paying out shareholders. At the same time, this was a reallocation of either equities or assets in the private and with private companies. But what really caught my eye was the 6% bucket. And what made me think is like if only 6% of everything else of earnings is getting invested into additional R&D, getting invested into kind of infrastructure like EBITDA with rent, and additional just funding for the business, when you spend money on technology such as software for finance and HR, in this case, they would be Workday, you really need to make sure that that investment generates the KPIs that are going to be impactful to the business. You can have a payback period that is acceptable by the finance team and ROI, your rate of return, everything that gets invested into the next software, solution that you guys bring to the table really has to be impactful. So I just want to put that out there because I feel like that's where Workday really makes an impact, specifically when we're talking about just that 6% bucket and how much little actually gets spent on infrastructure, but how impactful we can make it at the same time. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Today's episode is all about future proofing and how Workday is built for the future. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that and jump on in. So you guys have seen this slide a couple of times already. Workday has 2 releases a year. Our nomenclature is that we do the year and the release. 2020 R1 was in March, 2020 R2 coming up in September, and so forth. Now, when we look at that innovation stream or that cycle, all of these emerging technologies are built into those releases. And really it comes back from feedback. Part of the Workday community is that we have brainstorms. So you could go in and you could submit your ideas. People vote on them. Product development takes that and puts that into the next fold. But we have all these emerging technologies around artificial intelligence, machine learning, chatbots, blockchain. But what's really interesting to note and take point here is that since everybody's on the same version of Workday, there's 42 million users going in and initiating 100 billion transactions that we're capturing. So think about that training and learning data. They talk about that's the data that needs to be relevant to generate either an artificial intelligence use case or machine learning use case. So that signal line becomes very strong and steady. So when we roll out new solutions, they're going to be ready to go to market and you're going to hit the ground running. And what we mean by that is, being able to manage this from a solution of having 3 tenants. You guys just saw was production, sandbox, and development tenant. And when we look at those 3 tenants that you're able to manage, we actually update those weekly, but you also get all the latest release of that code as well. So not only are we syncing up your data between all those tenants, you're actually able to see the latest and greatest releases early in those stages. So when you start doing your stress testing, you're able to do it with your data and your business processes. Fast forward 5 weeks before we actually go through the release, and let's say, for example, it's the chatbot. You were going through the chatbot, doing all your stress testing. Now you could flip and toggle that switch from preview to the production tenant. And it's, since everybody's on the same version and latest release, you decide when those releases and upgrades are done. They're not forced by any means, because you may have heard that before, but they're not forced. It's all consumer tech, so extremely, want to make it extremely easy to manage. and have you go through kind of that innovation cycle with minimal disruption, right? So again, there's risk mitigation there because you're able to get your hands on that code and those releases early. You're able to sync it up with your data. You're able to test it. Boom, flip it over to the production tenant, and you hit the ground running. And that just continues to augment the power of one, right? So hopefully throughout this series and episode series, you're able to see kind of what the power of one really means, just beyond the technology stack of us having one platform. It's really augmented by our support model, by the innovation stream and cycle that we have, the community, just all the partners, and then you guys. I think the community is really what brings the power of one to full circle. It's all about your guys' customer satisfaction, the input that you guys give us on a day-to-day basis, and why we continue to work extremely hard is for our customers. So again, thank you for taking the time to review this. Hopefully one day you guys could be part of the Workday community. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself and Mandy for anything that comes out. But please, we're going to be putting together some additional exciting content, and we'll be sending that your way soon. And, we look forward to continuing the conversation with you, especially as we get out through all of this, in the next 6 months to a year. So that was another episode of Gone in 60 Seconds. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day, week, weekend, depending on when you're watching this, and we'll talk soon.